Hey everyone, today I'll be showing you how I created this height blend control system where it uses a multi-layer and I'm able to control where in the range I have blended the two layers or however many layers you want along with all the controls I have here. So let's get started. Also, if you want a full demo of this setup, the link for that is in the description below as well as in the top right corner if I remember to put it there. So here we are in a brand new project. There's absolutely nothing in here, and we're going to get started with this. This is in 5.2.1 right now, but it should work for any Unreal 5 version. It might even work in Unreal 4. I can't for sure know that, so double check that the nodes all exist in Unreal 4 if you want to recreate it there. So we're just going to get started with making a new folder, and we're just going to call it materials, and we're just going to make a new material. We're just going to call this a layered material base. You can call it anything you want, of course. Let's open it up. So in here, we're going to need to do a few things. First, we're going to need to use material attributes. And then we need to grab the material attribute layers. And we can just plug that in. And that is pretty much all we need to do here at the current moment. Then we need to make a new material layer. So let's call this ML height blend. And in fact, since it's all going to be height blend stuff, I'm just going to call it M height blend. It's going to be ML height blend, and we might as well create the material layer blend right now under material layer blend, and MLB height blend. So now we have the base, the material layer, and the material layer blend, and it's all going to play together nicely. So let's open up the material layer. First thing we're going to do is come in here and we're going to expose some parameters. So I'll just go ahead and expose base color. I'll expose roughness. I'll expose normals and custom UV7. So what we're going to do is we're going to pipe in just 3 textures for demo. And then this node, customize UV7, is where we're going to put our height information into. So that way it can be used. Because normally when you make material layers, or make it here attributes, there's no real place to put a height map that doesn't contradict with anything else here. You might want to use them for other things. So these are great to use, especially when you go to UV7, 6, 5, etc., because these are typically not used by actual models. Occasionally you'll maybe go up to 2, maybe 3. So I like to just go with the highest number I can and use that as my kind of pass through. So let's go ahead and get a texture sample, and we're going to go ahead and convert it to a parameter, and we're going to call it base color, and we're going to put it into a group. It's called textures, and we're going to do the same thing for roughness and for normal. So for these textures, we're just going to come in here, and we need to enable engine content. If it's not enabled, you just come in here, show engine content. And now you should have access to some default stuff. So I can go default base color. In here, that should have a normal, base flat normal map. And these are just going to be our defaults. And in roughness, I can go 127 gray. Just like that, we have our base stuff. I just realized I renamed this blend, not height blend. Let's keep it consistent. So if I now make a material instance of it and I open it up, we see we have all our info here. And here we have the material layers. So in material layers, I can now plug in my material layer height blend. And in here, I have the textures and I can pipe in my stuff. So there is our default material, right? Those are the default things in here. And of course, all beautiful. And we can change the base color to be anything we want now, and it will adjust accordingly. Okay, but let's get started on the actual height information. So I'm just going to go ahead and just duplicate one of these. We're going to rename it to height. And for convenience, I'm putting everything instead of texture. I'm going to put it all in the height group. First things first, we're going to need to specify which channel we want to use out of this. So we're going to do a channel mask parameter. We're going to call it height channel. And we're going to put it in the same group, height. So that we have everything nicely together. So this allows us to put our height information into a texture that is packed with something else and then specify which channel we want to use. So what I like to do at this point is remap and change the values of this texture information. So that way I have more control of it. So what I'm going to do is use a remap node, and then it effectively takes values from the texture that is between 0 to 1 and exports it 0 to 1. But I want to have the control of selecting where exactly I want the 0 to 1 range to be. So if, for example, this texture, its lowest point is actually at 0.4 and its highest point is 0.6, I want to actually take that and make that 0 to 1. So I want to extend that range so that way I now have a higher value range to play with, which makes it easier to control. So I'm going to hold S and left click to make a scalar parameter, and I'm going to call this remap low. And I'm going to put it into our height group, and I'm going to duplicate it and rename remap high. Default value will be 1. Input low, input high. So now I can actually remap this value from being 0 to 1 is 0 to 1. I can say this is now going to be 0.4 is actually 0. So I now have more room to play with. After that, what I like to do is use a cheap contrast to add any contrast I want. And same thing, I'm just going to duplicate this so I don't have to rechange the groups. And I'm going to call this extra contrast. The reason I say it's extra is because default value is 0. So if you have 0.1 in here, it is adding contrast into here. So if I set this to just say contrast, you might assume that 1 is your default. So that's why I say extra. So it makes a little more sense for me. Of course, name it as you want for yourself. And after everything, what I like to do is add a static switch parameter. So basically, this allows us to have a true-false statement that is exposed in the controls, so we can toggle this on and off dynamically. And what I'm going to do is call it enable height texture. So if it is enabled, it is just going to use all this information. But if it is disabled, I'm just going to give it a constant 0. So it has effectively no texture information at all. This is so if we're not going to be using a high texture in our current setup, we can just disable it and then not have it compute any of the stuff. So it basically is like not even there. And finally, we just need to grab this and give it a named reroute declaration node. I'm going to call it height. And that is pretty much our base height blend setup. And in here, I'm going to come out, type in height, named reroutes, and there's our height. So now we're now pushing that height information through into Customize UV7. That is all this. So this way we don't have to drag it all the way over. So you're able to maintain a little bit of a cleaner setup. If you guys are enjoying this so far and it's being helpful, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It really would help me out. Now back to the tutorial. So then open up your material layer blend and let's get started on setting that up. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually change up this section. This is our bottom layer, and I'm going to pull it out and give it a named reroute and just call bottom layer. And same thing with this guy. I'm going to come out and just say name reroute top layer. And then we can just use top layer and bottom layer here for the time being. The reason we're doing this is because we need to grab the information of the height from these two layers. Put these here, and then I'm going to go top layer, get material attributes. And what we're going to need to grab is our height information. So that is in Customize UV7. And here we can say add named reroute, and we're going to call this height top, for this being our top layer's height. And we're going to grab our bottom layer, also get our material attributes, and call this height bottom. So now we have our two different height informations here. So I'm going to comment this, and we're going to call it material layer split. This is if you want to split out more things to have more control of them. This is how you would do it. You just add another input here, and you can split out your base colors now from your top versus bottom ones and blend them separately. That's how I do a lot of my controls. But this is all we need here, so let's move it up. And now let's make some room and actually get started on everything. So first things first, we're going to grab the height top, And we're going to remap. And then we're going to need two scalar parameters. And I'm going to call this height low and height high. Same thing as we did before. And let's go ahead and just put these all in a group called height blend 1. Here we're going to go on the low and high here for our blend controls. And then we're going to need to get a within range setup. So this is a nice note. So this allows us to specify the range at which we want the actual blend to happen. And so instead of it being from 0 to 0.5, I can say it's between 0.3 and 0.6, for example. And this allows us to have that control. Then we need our height bottom, and we're going to mask it by just the red channel. At this point, it doesn't matter which channel you mask it with, I believe, because it has pretty much made a grayscale coming into here. But we're just making sure that it's grabbing the original channel, and we're going to use that for our value. So effectively, we're going to take the mask that we made on the bottom channel. We're using that as our mask, and we're specifying where within that mask do we want that information to exist. At which point, we need to grab this information and call it, and give it a named reroute, and we're going to call this height mask. So this is the actual mask that is used for the blending. So if we actually ignore this part for now, and we just used height mask, we can come over to this section and type in height mask, and we can go ahead and try it out already. So if I open up my material that I've made, the instance, and make a new layer, I can go in here and assign a new material layer. I assign my new material layer blend. So let's make this slightly different. So let's in here turn on our base color, and let's make this something different. As you see here, the height information doesn't pop up because I need to enable it. That's actually something I forgot to do. So in here, we need to give this its proper group. So I'm going to come in here, give it the height group, and I'm going to make it default value of something like 10. So it'll be right on top. So we now have this height information here. But of course, we want to input the height on the base layer first. So let's enable it for the base layer, and let's give it a noise. Something like this. And now under our blend of the next layer, we now control where we want to blend. So right now it's going between 0 and 1. And if we want to go a little bit lower, you can see right there, we can specify the full range already of this setup. So effectively it is now working. So if this is all you need, then you're good. But what I want is we have this height texture here we can put in, right? We can put a height texture in here. And this is a layered setup. We can have tons of different noises, tons of different setups. Maybe this one has its height information is from this. And you might want to then start using this information in this range, etc. So this is where we go ahead and do the second step, which is actually passing all this information through to the next layer, to the next layer, to the next layer, etc. So let's go back to our material layer blend. Let's come back to this section. So now to push it all through, we need to go ahead and lerp all this. So if you just type in lerp or hold L and just click, you can just put in your height mask in your alpha. The B is the height top information. A remains at 0. And now we need to control this a little bit more. So here we need to multiply it by a factor of 100 and then saturate it, because the numbers are very low in here. I believe they're a factor of 100, which is why I put this here. It has been a very long time since I did this, but I trust myself in the past. So it's multiplied by 100. And then once again, it is lerped. So we're using this as our alpha, and then our B channel comes from here, and our A channel comes all the way from our height bottom. So we can do something like this. And here we can go ahead and use our named reroute and call this height bind. So now let's go ahead and just take this, comment it, call it height blend. And now we have our node, but we need to push this through into the next section. Now let's go ahead and go back to our actual blend material attributes. So this is where it has all been blended. But right before the output, we're going to go ahead and just say set material attributes. And so we're going to need to, of this blend, we're replacing one of the nodes because we wanted to do our blend. So here we're going to go ahead and say customize UV7, which are the node that we've been using. And here we're going to say height combined. And so for the next section, it is actually going to have the full information of both those heights together. So if we go ahead and check this out, so here it has a new map. And if I go ahead and make a new layer again, and I'm just going to go ahead and just sample both of these to make it easy, let's go ahead and put in a new texture in here so we can tell what's going on. Let's go ahead and use this one. Here we're going to use a height information here. So we're going to use it from, let's pull it down a little bit, push it up. And you can see we're now getting the combined version of the two. These tiny ones, they came from the height information of this middle layer. So in here, we have specified that this is the height information. So if I uncheck this, you can see this is the height information. So now our next layer can use this. But of course, if I don't want to have something here, if you want to have everything use the default height from the original, you can just uncheck it and it'll just use the original. So you have the control of combining heights or not combining. You can also, of course, specify your channel in here. If it is not a gray, black and white image, it's not grayscale, you can specify that. Just like that, we now have our full combined setup pretty much. The only thing else that I like to do is in the material layer blend, I don't always want to use the height mask, right? Sometimes you want to just have something else. So what I do is I like to use a static switch parameter. I'm going to call it enable height blend. And in here, I'm going to put it under the group control. And if I don't want to blend anything, maybe I want to blend the full thing, I'll leave it as 1 as default. So that way it uses the full value of the original. And here I'm going to call this the name reroute and call it height blend or just blend chain. Because this is where I will combine multiple things. So if I have a height blend potentially, I have an RGB mask, I have some other types of blends, I have Fresnels or something else, it would all go in this chain, multiply by each other so they all can work together. And in the end of this blend chain, I could just use it in here. And just like that, I will have all the controls. So in here, again, if I go back to my instance, I can just not use it and it's just going to be a full replacement, or I can use it and it's not. Of course, you wouldn't use it just with this, but assuming here is your default blend, however you want to use it, now you have a control to turn it on and off. But just like that, we now have the ability to blend the different layers in different ranges and have as many as we want, all playing together nicely. And next time, I will show you guys how to take this information and then bake it down to a texture that you can then use that baked height information to use as a displacement for your static meshes and make it super high res, similar to what I did in the original demo, which is this right here. So this, I'm able to take that height information and then displace the actual bricks out, displace the dirt, and make it far more high res from the original plane compared to this guy, which is just originally completely flat. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. And with that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.